Hello, I'm David Howell. I'm Head of Heritage Science at the Bodleian Libraries and based in the Western Library. I'm only going to talk about one object, but I don't have to catch a train. I'm going to be in the room downstairs and I can show you lots of other objects and lots of other things that I do. So this is a one object presentation followed by a multi-object discussion. We see things with our eye, and I've always thought that our eye is actually not a very good design. If you were going to design something for looking at colour, you wouldn't just use 3 colour sensors. You'd be more like this very unusual shrimp and have lots of different sensors. But it's only in the last couple of years I've realised that the reason we only have 3 sensors is because speed is more important than the accuracy of our colour vision. So when the light changes from red to green, you need to react quite quickly. So I can do a scan looking at many colours over, say, half an hour, but if you're waiting at the traffic lights for half an hour for someone to realise they've changed, this is not so good. So the whole reason why we have limited colour vision is because of that need for speed of reaction. But if we want to look at many more colours, have many more sensors than our own eyes, we have a machine that can do it for us. So this machine here is called a hyperspectral imaging system, and it actually looks at each pixel in an image and looks at the whole spectrum from 400 to 1,000 nanometers. So that's the whole of the visible spectrum for each individual pixel. What that allows you to do is then visualize that information, and I have to take the random information or the information that this spectral imaging is giving me, and then I have to visualize it so we can see it with our 3 color sensors. So the computer has to do the image manipulation to render it into some information that we can see, but it can visualize things that we can't see with our normal naked eyes. So I've just got one example that I'm going to give you this evening and then maybe more later. So this is one of the treasures of the Bodleian Library. It's a PreColumbian Codex. And there are only, I think, 19 of these existing in the whole world. So they're really rare. And this one in particular is a palimpsest. A palimpsest is where a page is covered over so it can be reused. So you actually cover up the existing text and then you reuse it. This page has not been reused, so it's been covered over but hasn't been reused. In the 1950s, some archaeologists and curators noticed that there were some coloured areas visible through the gesso layer that's covering up what's underneath. And they did some pretty horrible things to this poor codex. So they soaked it in xylene to see if they could see what was underneath. They bombarded it with sand to try and blast off the surface. They did scraping with scalpels. They did some pretty nasty things before we knew that was probably a bad thing to do. We don't do so much of that now. And they said in, I think, 1958, we're going to put this away and we're never going to look at it again because we're never going to see what's under the surface. We did some hyperspectral imaging, and after a year of playing with the data, my colleague in Leiden managed to reveal enough information to recreate what's underneath the surface. So some of the dark lines are his additions just to make what's visible in the colour more apparent. But this is the sort of technology that can be used to reveal, say, hidden texts, to look at signatures that may have been erased, and also for mapping pigments and doing all sorts of things to do with colour. If you want to read more, this book was launched last night, and there's a really good chapter in it on hyperspectral imaging of objects. And as I say, I'm going to be here this afternoon, and I'd be really interested in people who want to come and talk to me about using my facilities, or our facilities I should say, for any projects that you may be putting in funding bids for, or whether you just want to know how it works. The article in here is about hyperspectral imaging of objects, artifacts, so we don't just do books. And that's about it, but you can ask me lots of questions downstairs later if you want.